Catus, Maximus here, this time with a quick review of these Harbor Freight Icon large Phillips and slot head bit set, or bit socket set. They, of course, come in these plastic cases, which are useful by themselves, but add to the final price and really isn't the best. So I had some Pittsburghs, and actually the number one, so I went in there to actually replace it because I had broken it using it with too big of an impact wrench, trying to get out a very recalcitrant screw that even my impact driver wouldn't remove. And that's kind of the purpose of these things here, is that they are just simply, supposedly, heavy duty bits that are supposed to work with very stuck and recalcitrant fasteners. But really the reality is like they come with the pretty small Phillips, this being a number two, and an impact driver will pretty much deal with any number two Phillips. And excuse me, I was mistaken. I had actually broke the number three Phillips. It comes with a number three and then of course a number four Phillips. And so these icons, I figured, you know, they're only 20 bucks. I'll see how they hold up over the Pittsburghs. But they're a couple things. I have been reading a lot of the icon hex socket bits, as well as some of these actually haven't been so great, but I figured I'd give them a shot because many times these are the type of thing that you may break one, but it's nice to have another one on hand. But I'll say right off the bat, you know, for 20 bucks, I'd probably still stick with the Pittsburghs, even though these icons may be a little bit stronger. They look nice, but we'll really get into the Phillips in a second here because that's going to be the longer part of this video. The slot head ones are a little better just because they're using much thicker stock, and the stock is proportionally larger for each size of these large slot heads. And so these are going to perform better because you just have a lot more material there. Although with these, your strength isn't limited by the shank diameter. It's of course limited by how thick the slot head tine is itself. Should note that these are not what are known as drag link sockets, which are of course the super huge size slot head sockets. I have a few here, and when it comes to these types of specific sockets where you're relying on this really thin edge for the strength, I actually recommend buying the professional truck brands because you're usually just buying a single socket and it's totally worth it. Like here we have a Proto, I've got a Snap-on, and even a Mac Tools. This Mac Tools, as you can see, is just absolutely massive, 1¼ inch wide. It's about as big a slot head driver as you'll ever see. So that would be my overall recommendation for large flathead socket drivers, is to get drag link sockets from a tool truck because you're just usually buying, once again, 1, 2, or 3 sockets. So just get some really nice ones. But as far as the slot heads, I actually, you know, compared to what we have here, the Pittsburghs, or these are like old OEM or PT tools before they were actually stamping their tools. But they basically have all been the same. These PT tool ones are just tend to be a little bit longer, but these would be considered just bog standard. Now, my main criticism really is against the Phillips in this set because they are a bit undersized. And what I mean by that is when you need to drive large Phillips, there are a variety of options available, like such as these 7/16 shank bits, super heavy duty. This one actually happens to also be a slot head. You also have the bits that come with impact drivers. These 5/16 shank usually come with half-inch drive hand impact drivers, and then they come with an adapter like this. And these are always nice because you can really hammer on them. They're impact rated. And you can, of course, replace the bit if you ever strip it out or have any issues. And then there are Super Duty square drive ones. Real quick, a Super Duty square drive is Super Duty because when you're measuring the same width of bit, say this is a 5/16 bit and this is also a 5/16 bit, when they have the same measurement across the flats, you can see that a square actually has a little bit more material because a 5/16 hex is a 5/16 square with the corners knocked off. That actually removes some material. So if you ever run into these square drive ones, those are the true Super Duty. Comparing to actual nice quality or better quality sockets, it really starts to show on this number 4 Phillips. I have this no-name Taiwanese industrial tool. I mean, it's so no-name that the roll stamping is actually like all cantered. But it's nice because it uses a 3/8 base size instead of the 5/16, and it's replaceable. And then on this OEM tools, they're actually using a 10mm base size stock. And when you get into this number 4 Phillips, you can really see the difference. Using 5/16 stock to try to cut a very large number 4 Phillips means you have just very little taper there for the grab. So if you have a particularly deep Phillips screw or something like that, this may not provide 100% engagement. That's one of the reasons also, because you can end up applying a huge amount of torque with that. That's why these other ones are actually pretty thick, like 3/8 or 10 millimeter. You can also see the other distinct advantage that occurs when you have a thicker base stock is you just get a much more natural shape with nice large tapers that will fully seat in any number 4 Phillips that you work on. And that's particularly true with this 10 millimeter base stock version. That was just a really nice and meaty Phillips. So I was a bit disappointed that the premium Icon was using only 5/16 stock, because it kind of makes for a weak and maybe not fully engaging. Maybe in most situations this is just enough taper to really get a full seat, but not really. And you'd always feel more confident using one that has a thicker base stock, because it's going to be more rigid and a bit stronger. And so that was really the big disappointment. Even though they're only like 20 bucks, these Icons could have been better. They really just seem like Pittsburghs with a nicer finish. And even on the box, they're not even advertising like S2 steel or anything like that. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to point out. Actually, I should also point out that this stock here, the square one, happens to be the same width as this 5/16 here, except for the fact that it's square. And so since the Phillips has 4 points, they intelligently cut the actual wings of the Phillips right along with the corners of the square, so that this is the same width as this, but just has a much better fit just because it was intelligently manufactured. And speaking of that, there's a little bit of insult to injury here, which would be, say, on this large one, we can see that when they were machining it, it wasn't perfectly aligned. So you kind of have this little odd shape where it's just a little bit chamfered, and it's obviously not a huge deal at all, but it's still just a little bit annoying when you're getting the premium ones and the alignment isn't correct during the manufacturing process. And one last thing to point out is they could have done something nicer. Has had one more operation like this OEM Tools. They just had one extra operation here, which just knocked off to 2 corners, so you have like just a really nice straight slot head. They could have done that on the Icon as well, and that does save money. Every one of these little operations on a CNC machine wears out tooling, more wear on the machine, and once you get the tool design, the stock in, that's where your manufacturing costs are, is really just machine runtime and tool wear. So that's why when you think, why would they cut out just such a seemingly innocuous little operation? Because when you times that innocuous little operation times thousands or tens of thousands of units, it adds up to a big bill. And it's just kind of a shame that the premium Icon that they are cutting those types of corners. So anyway, generally speaking, if you like the Icon, I would get these. Otherwise, I would find these types of sets tend to be reasonably priced even off the tool trucks. And this is one of those situations where I'm going to try these Icons out, but I would recommend for you to get something much nicer. At least you have an idea what to look for, like heavier duty shanks and really good machining geometry. And you're of course aware of drag link sockets. So if you really need large flatheads, this is where you go to get the super duty ones. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.